The world of virology is a complex one, and it is claimed by some proponents that there are up to 1 billion distinct virus species. Most of these characters do not even have names, but some are household names because they are said to affect and spread between humans. This list includes measles, chickenpox, herpes, influenza, and coronaviruses. While they captivate a certain amount of attention, they do not always seem scary to the majority of the public. But then we have Ebola, alleged to be caused by a contagious virus and coming with a 50% mortality rate. It has been the subject of Hollywood films, as well as popular books, and can strike deathly fear in those who know very little about it. Lately, Ebola has been back in the news, with the WHO announcing it was a, quote, public health emergency of international concern. However, even on their own terms, Ebola is an unlikely candidate for a fake pandemic. So, what is this latest campaign about?
Now to the latest on the Ebola outbreak. U.S. officials announcing a new plan to stop the fast-moving virus from arriving in this country. U.S.-bound flights carrying passengers who have visited Ebola-affected countries in Africa must now land at Washington Dulles International Airport. There, the CDC will conduct enhanced health screenings. Still, experts say with cases soaring in Africa, global spread is still likely. Meanwhile, some new video shows a medical clinic in the Democratic Republic of Congo engulfed in flames. Authorities say protesters there were angry. Officials would not release the body of a loved one likely killed by the virus.
Well, it appears just as hantavirus starts to fade as a talking point, Ebola is injected into the public conversation. If you have not seen my previous videos about hantavirus, then please watch those, as they outline the themes at play with these alleged extremely high mortality viruses. But the topic of this video is Ebola virus, and while this is our first publication fully dedicated to it, we have certainly covered it several times over the COVID-19 era. In fact, let's have a look at this flashback where we noted that Ebola was being name-dropped in early 2020. Also of note during Tedros's media announcement in February 2020 was that he opened his speech by saying,
"Before I update you on the coronavirus outbreak, I would like to start with a few words about Ebola. As you know, we have two fronts now. Although the world is now focused on coronavirus, we cannot and must not forget Ebola. We're very encouraged by the current trend. There have only been 3 cases last week, and no cases in the past 3 days. But until we have no cases for 42 days, it's not over. As you know, any single case could reignite the epidemic."
That's right. Not satisfied by just kicking off the world's biggest virology fraud to date, he also dropped in an advertisement for the existing, yet non-existing, quote, Ebola virus. Nothing like stirring up the audience by mentioning apparently lethal contagion during a COVID talk. Indeed, Ebola has been in and out of the news cycles since it was first introduced in 1976. We will get to how it apparently jumped out of the jungle in the 1970s, but why would it take so long to make an appearance in human history? This is where backstories are invented, such as the virus was lurking in animals for thousands of years before somebody was scratched by a bat, or ate a porcupine, or had an interaction with a chimpanzee. Not to be outdone on this front, in 2015 the University of Texas medical branch stated, "To find Ebola's origin, scientists looked for pieces of Ebola and Marburg genetic information in animal fossils. They examined the genomes of 2 voles and 2 hamsters and found the same genetic pieces of the viruses in the same locations on both species. This suggests the viruses had infected a common ancestor of these rodents, sometime before the Miocene epoch, 23 million years ago. The combination of viral genomics and evolutionary biology sure is swell pseudoscience, just like fishing for the same sequences over and over again and presenting it as evidence for SARS-CoV-2, or a purported evolving strain if the sequences vary a bit too much. In our book, The Final Pandemic, we feature a subchapter titled Fear-Inducing Viruses, like Ebola, that never arrive. We outline the jungle jump story as promoted by the CDC and how the entire model is based on speculation rather than scientific evidence. In short, no jungle jump and no spread, only clusters of illness in particular areas. Most of the symptoms of Ebola are non-specific and said to be like influenza or even malaria, which makes clinical case creation rather easy. Laboratory tests are said to be required to make the definitive diagnosis, and we will get to those soon. The hallmark of severe Ebola is supposed to be hemorrhagic fever, something that the vast majority of doctors have never seen. However, the public think they have because Hollywood loves to create scenes showing healthy people that suddenly become unwell, start bleeding from the eyes, and then drop dead, all within a few hours. While these depictions are complete fantasy, hemorrhagic fever, albeit rare, is a real thing that can have several causes. However, something odd was observed when an AI program was asked about non-viral hemorrhagic fever, because it responded, "There is no specific information regarding non-viral hemorrhagic fevers. The context exclusively defines viral hemorrhagic fevers." Rephrasing the search to look for non-viral causes of hemorrhagic fever, the AI program responded, "Hemorrhagic fever is primarily defined as a condition caused by viruses such as Ebola, Marburg, and Lassa, but non-viral etiologies can produce a hemorrhagic syndrome that mimics viral hemorrhagic fevers." This preposterous response indicates how much the establishment has tried to bring everything back to viruses. It is clear that fever with bleeding can be caused by chemical poisoning, pharmaceuticals, and serious conditions such as leukemia. There is nothing that, quote, mimics viral hemorrhagic fevers in the form of a, quote, syndrome, because by definition it pertains to fever and bleeding issues. It is a prime example of using viruses as a cover story for what really makes people ill. In this case, fraudulent tests have been introduced to mislead the world into thinking that viruses are to blame. When we consult the WHO's guidance document on diagnostic testing for Ebola, we can see that it hinges first on nucleic acid amplification tests, such as PCR, and second on antibody assays. Notably, the document pushes towards further testing if the initial results are negative, and is more concerned about, quote, false negative tests. We know that positive PCR or antibody tests do not require the existence of viruses, and we will look at some of the original 1970s science surrounding alleged Ebola isolation soon. The WHO document somewhat amusingly states, "Virus isolation is not recommended as a routine diagnostic procedure because it involves propagation of virus." Yes, that is a problem for them. To show you why, it is time for another flashback to my video, Bioweapons BS. One of the scariest narratives in the world of virology is Ebola, also known as Ebola hemorrhagic fever, with a supposed death rate of 50% and a massive Wikipedia page. This is something that they want you to know all about. In 2002, this paper titled Hemorrhagic Fever, Viruses as Biological Weapons appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They claimed that Ebola viruses were on their watch list because of the following key features. 1. High morbidity and mortality. 2. Potential for person-to-person transmission. 3. Low infective dose and highly infectious by aerosol dissemination. 4. Effective vaccine unavailable or available only in limited supply.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
5. Potential to cause public and healthcare worker anxiety. 6. Availability of pathogen or toxin. 7. Feasibility of large-scale production. 8. Environmental stability, and 9. Prior research and development as a biological weapon. We'll see that of these, the only thing they have in reality is point 5, that is causing anxiety in people's minds who believe that bioweapons actually exist. Humorously, the paper cites Alabek's book Biohazard as evidence of bioweapons programs. But in order to have an actual Ebola bioweapon, you have to have a virus first. So let's have a look at the evidence on offer. The quote virus is alleged to be so infectious that coming into contact with any body fluid is enough to allow its transmission. However, despite this claimed infectiousness, the outbreaks are limited to small-scale sporadic occurrences in destitute West African countries, where there are many other environmental reasons why people get sick in clusters. At this point, you may see the Joker card in the form of a famous case, such as Jeffrey Platt. He was a British laboratory technician who was said to be the first incidence of Ebola in a first world country. In 1976, while working in the Porton Down Microbiological Research Lab, Platt pricked his thumb with a liver sample from a guinea pig said to be infected with the virus. Initially, they reported he was alert and did not seem to be particularly ill. However, over the next week, he developed all sorts of symptoms, including sweating, fevers, diarrhea and vomiting, altered mental state, and protein in his urine. It all sounds pretty dramatic and was put down to the quote virus that was attacking him. Except there's a bit more to consider with the story. First, there was no bleeding, so it wasn't a hemorrhagic fever. Second, if you read the quote treatments they were administering, you will see that not only did they give him 2 infusions of serum on days 3 and 6, but they were also injecting him with interferon twice daily for 14 days. Interferons are proteins that are known to cause all sorts of reactions in the body, including all of the ones that Platt displayed. This is classic allopathic medicine tunnel vision. First, assuming that a germ is causing every problem and not investigating other causes. And second, not pausing to think whether it may be the quote treatments that are in fact also causing some symptoms. The terror of being placed in an isolation unit and told that you have a deadly virus is also a sure way to cause distress. On a related note, the case report stated that of the 24 nurses who were directly concerned in the care of the patient, 6 became ill with acute respiratory infections, which lasted on average 2 days. 4 of the 5 doctors looking after the patient developed a flu-like illness, with some gastrointestinal symptoms, but the problems invariably resolved within 2 or 3 days. Again, nobody was experiencing hemorrhagic fevers, and it appeared to be anxiety manifesting as physical symptoms, precipitated by fear of deadly contagion. What about the alleged virological investigations in the Platt case? Strangely, the report claimed that a blood specimen was examined by electron microscopy and virus particles were seen, which were similar to those of Ebola virus. Virologists don't usually claim that they can see viruses directly in blood samples, so this is pretty dodgy, even on their own terms. Additionally, the patient Platt himself was a co-author in a 1977 Lancet publication that reported they required Vero cell cultures to produce these images of their claimed Ebola virus. The case report also mentioned, quote, guinea pig infective units in the virus isolation section, but did not detail the methodology. However, if we consult the just mentioned Lancet publication, we can see that they described injecting material from sick individuals into the abdominal cavities of young guinea pigs as a form of, quote, virus isolation. No control experiments were performed, and as you can see, are dozens of videos and articles covering the pseudoscience involved in virology's claims of isolation. I'd also recommend Mike Stone's recent article, The Ebola Virus, Part 1, on virology for a more detailed analysis of why no virus was isolated. Please watch that entire video if you want to see the dismantling of further foundational scientific claims of Ebola, including the 2015 study that purportedly killed marmosets with the quote virus. The link is in the description. Additionally, when we published the final pandemic in 2024, there were only 2 deaths attributed to Ebola amongst people who were based outside of Africa at the time they were said to be, quote, infected. Both were in Russia, and with the limited second-hand reports available, only the naive would accept this as evidence of a virus. Instead, the stories were shrouded in Russian military bioweapon lab secrecy. That's right, it's top secret. And broadcast to the whole world. Ebola is arguably the top shelf in pseudoscientific viral fear porn. It is part of one of the 5 families of alleged viruses said to cause hemorrhagic fevers.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
The establishment's 5 families are being used to create a contrived monopoly on the public health responses to this organised crime. This includes the manufactured market for so-called antiviral drugs and vaccines. And while the current market in the sector has already reached into the hundreds of millions in the last decade, it could be made even bigger. Indeed, the extra scare with the latest campaign is that the current Ebola vaccines don't work with this particular strain. Never fear, as the BBC just flew the headline, UK scientists developing Ebola vaccine that could be ready for trials in months. We are informed that the vaccine uses the same technology the team developed during the COVID pandemic. I'm not sure they appreciate that people might be less inclined to receive the results of such technology in their body again. The whole business is a rinse and repeat operation, with the coordinated promotion of fear narratives involving imaginary pathogens and germ mythology. People are expected to watch and wait as the quote experts and agencies take control of the situation and present their solution. This includes pointless rituals, suspension of civil liberties, and fake countermeasures, including drugs and vaccines. Welcome to the pandemic industry, a behemoth that suppresses and loots vast amounts of wealth from the public while helping to advance the biosecurity surveillance state. The good news is that far more people than ever before are aware of this scam, and there is a simple solution. When you are presented with an offer to participate in any of these manufactured health crises, you can decide not to energize the situation. Instead, put your efforts into actions that will ensure real benefits towards true health and well-being. And perhaps you can help other people see there are plenty of better things they could be doing rather than supporting the pandemic industry. If they need some ideas, then I'm sure you'll think of something.
Ja nyt kaikki tanssimaan meidän omaan diskoon.
If you enjoyed this video, please visit supportdrsam.com.